action denoted in sales or privatization of the 4 refineries who have got over trillions of naira for rehabilitation and maintenance have little to show for it in result. Meanwhile, the downstream sector competition will be open if the federal government eventually take this on. Another very good example of someone who have put out statement in this regard is the president of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, who suggested that the facility may never be viable due to mismanagement and may not resume operation. One very clear and instructive example from the NNPC is that this rehabilitated work on a 450,000 barrel per capacity refinery were not yielding the desired result due to how obsolete the facilities have become over the years. However, one critical question that is begging for answer at this point in time is that with this privatization of sales, will it be done transparently? Will it show accountability on the part of the government? And will it not be something that we will have to call back after we have done the sales or privatization? Because many are pointing to the level that during the Obasanjo era, we did the same thing, but all of a sudden, when Yar'Adua took over power from Obasanjo, it reversed the sales. Joining me today on the show is no other person than engineer Dr. Wisdom Enang, who is an energy consultant and senior analyst who have been around for a very long time talking about the energy sector in Nigeria, particularly the downstream and the midstream sector of Nigeria energy sector. He will be joining me shortly so that we can have a view on this prospect of the sales. Is it timely? Is it something that we can rely on at this point in time? Will it also broaden the spectrum of the midstream and downstream competition, and will it also close the gap of fuel or PMS importation into the country? We are expecting a very smooth connection with Dr. Enang so that we can have one of the laudable conversations on this particular issue at this point. So, in my own opinion, and in the opinion of many who have brought out issues on this regard, talking about the energy sector in Nigeria, it has become a big problem. I will put it in a local parlance. We normally say big wahala for the federal government of Nigeria. In the regards of privatization, we could be called under Obasanjo era, it was sold for over $50 billion, the 4 of them, but all of a sudden, it was reversed. So what would be the value of these 4 refineries? What would be the taking of these refineries? When I mean taking, I mean how will the people, investors, be able to review and view these particular refineries that we're about to put up for sales? And another very interesting question we also need to ask ourselves is that we spent a whopping $18 billion on turnaround maintenance. But here we are, nothing to show for it. So these are the germane questions that have come up. Even the NNPC GMD himself, Mr. Bayo Julari, has raised the poster for every Nigerians to review. And here we are, Dr. Enang. A very good day to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Exactly. So let's get down to the issue. How did you receive the news of NNPC proposed sales or privatization of the 4 national refineries?
All right. I think NNPC is basically saying that it is reviewing all options on the table. I think at this point, NNPC is saying that they're going to look at the business decision not from a context of making sure that Nigeria owns a refinery, but from Nigerian government owns a refinery, but from the context of ensuring that the best value for the money prevails. And whether that means running the facility itself or selling it or outsourcing that facility for another person to run and operate on a profit-sharing basis. So there's a number of options. But what is clear is that the NNPCL has had to go back, review, and try and revalidate some of the assumptions that led to the continued ownership of the refinery by the government. Because these fundamentals may not be valid today if you want to compare them to the Obasanjo era when those refineries were up for sale and then revoked. Those fundamentals may not be the same. So it's always good to retest your economic fundamentals. It's always good to retest your theories and make sure that the very decisions you made are still contextually correct in this time and climate. But one thing I want to say is there's a big question on my mind, your mind, everybody's mind as to whether or not there's a possibility to get value out of those refineries, whether it be privately run or owned and run by the NNPCL. There's that discussion. But I think the best way to answer that discussion is, I always say to people, is to go back the three key things that Shell Petroleum had identified at the time where the Obasanjo era approached them. The Obasanjo era said they should look at possibly picking up the refinery, either buying it, running it on a profit sharing basis, or even running it and being paid to run it for the government. And all three approaches were declined. They were declined because Shell cited that the size was very not flexible in the context of economics of scale, because the profit in the downstream sector is quite lean. So if you want to run it profitably, you need to have the right scale to allow you be able to get more economics of scale. The second thing was the maintenance approach that was being taken at the issue, which means a lot of the facilities there are, some of them are moribund, some of them are upgraded facilities, but the upgrades are not integrated properly, especially with the legacy equipment. Now, that's the second thing. And then the third thing was the governance approach of, how it is being governed and how there's some sort of interference between how it is being run and the way the government, the government political decisions interfere with that sort of technical decisions that have to be made on the refinery. For these reasons, Shell declined. So if anyone is going to take up that facility, they will have to retest their hypothesis across these very three key areas and find out that it still holds water before they can go ahead. Now, in terms of value, are we going to get better value than we got during the time where the Dangote had bidded for these refineries back then? I don't think so. I don't think so, because we may not be able to command the same value. Things have gone worse. Equipment has gone bad over time. The person who is doing this will have to decide how exactly they're going to turn it around. And I'm sure they will need more investment. And that investment will even compete with building modular refineries. So it's very clever the way that, things, I think it's clever the way the government may want to put it, to be able to get the right level of attention from investors from it. But, there's a lot of things that we're going to see in the shortest future to come.
Exactly. And I have to say something very clear that Mr. Obayo Julari, the current GMD of NNPC, said. He said most of the things around that refineries are a little bit complicated. And complicated in the sense that they have spent $18 billion for turnaround maintenance. That is term, and there's nothing to show for it. And you are taking us back, Doc, you are taking us back to the Obasanjo era, where it was approximately, those refineries were almost bought for about $50 billion. And you're also telling us right now that we may not be able to get up to that amount after we have spent $18 billion for turnaround. Doc, how do we find ourselves in this kind of conundrum at this point in time? Spending $18 billion, and if you are going to sell it, I even read some articles from some energy experts like yourself who are saying that we may not even get value for it, maybe less than $10 billion. Doc, how do we get ourselves into this conundrum?
I think the issue is we can only kind of leverage benefits of hindsight right now. And when you talk about hindsight, you're talking about learning from experiences, and it's not usually the best form of learning. But there are a few, I think, things that we can take away. One is this: there needs to be some form of accountability, because I don't understand how people would have gone through, become director of refining operations, get promoted all the way through the ranks, and there has been really no refining to show for it. That's one. The other one is every business needs to be looked at from a capitalist standpoint. Because when you start looking at business and you're thinking, it will look good for Nigeria to have a refinery, even when the state-run refinery may not give the sort of benefits we're looking at, and we keep using money to push in that direction. It's time to really, think based on economic fundamentals and not based on sentiment. So I think those are the few takeaways. Then the other thing is there needs to be a clear dichotomy between the political, folks and the guys, the technocrats. Those decisions, for example, could have been made a long time ago. Much longer ago. I'm sure the technocrats saw this coming. I'm sure they saw that it's going to be a hot year battle. You could potentially maybe be able to turn around the refinery, but is it going to pretend much value than building a new refinery with this kind of amount, even in building a small scale refinery? What would be the sort of cost benefit analysis? I'm sure a lot of experts would have seen it, but maybe some of those voices may not have been able to come out as much as they would have wanted because of the political shadow around the whole thing. So I think going forward, we need to allow the expert examine the fundamentals, retest hypotheses, and then make a decision, and then we can adopt that from a policy standpoint, and not the political folks setting the target and then the experts doing some reverse engineering to be able to meet targets that may not actually be realistic.
Exactly. Now, let's not take a look at one of the things that the stakeholders in the oil and gas sector have rightly put out just since on Monday. I saw some write-ups from Meman, from Protrain, and all the stakeholders in the oil and gas sector. One of the things they said was that this could be a timely intervention, but they have issue with transparency of the process. What they are trying to say is that we see that it's a timely intervention that is coming from the government, but what about the transparency in the process of carrying out these sales and this privatization? Do you have any concern about that?
I mean, at the moment, everybody has always said that there's going to be a sale. What the gentleman has said, the jury has said, is that all options are on the table, and that he's willing to take tough decisions that other people may not be willing to take. And that everybody should review the fundamentals. But NNPCL in itself will not just stand up and make a sale. They will make an operational recommendation.
Exactly.
Which will then still have to get the buy-in of the regulators. This has to do with energy. Energy security is a very important issue when it comes to stability, geopolitical stability. It has to go to the all the way through the regulators, and then all the way through the Minister of Petroleum, who is the President himself. So it's not exactly that you just start to sell and you get a buyer. The other thing that I see is that this current administration is very much interested in making sure that people operationalize the assets. Because before now, what used to happen is people buy petroleum assets, use it to get alcohol loans or all sorts of loans and live off those loans, and use it to without necessarily developing those assets. So you see this administration very much proposing the idea that rather than get, for example, the sign-up bonuses for oil wells, that they will rather you reduce the sign-up bonuses and use that money to produce your assets. And so they have now put in what we call a drill or drop provision in the upstream sector, that if you do not drill those assets, you lose the assets. So I think what I'm personally expecting, I mean, I've not spoken to them, I don't have any inside knowledge, but what I'm expecting is that the government would would put up these refineries for sale, but there will be a revocation provision, or there should be a revocation provision that says, look, if you do not operationalize these assets by this time that you have promised, then we can revoke the sales back and give it to somebody else who is ready to operationalize the assets. Even if we've lost money on capital investments, let's see how we can redesign the sale to allow us to get money from utility value.
Very interesting. But let's go into the technicality of these refineries. 4 of them, Port Harcourt 1 and 2, Warri and Kaduna. From your own insight as a practitioner and someone who is also an engineer in this sector, why did we have such a challenge with the functionality, operationalization of this refinery? Because a lot of stories have come about. Let's hear from your own perspective as an engineer and someone who is also a stakeholder in that industry.
Well, I mean, without being actively working on the plants, you couldn't be sure all of it will be based on postulation. But one thing I can tell you is that the era before the petroleum industry act and the depth of after the petroleum industry act are completely different. The NNPCL under before the Petroleum Industry Act was, there wasn't a very good clarity between other players and the regulators, and there were decisions that they could have taken them without, any contest, anyone contesting against that decision. But right now, under the PIA, fine, it's, as I said, with benefit of hindsight, we now know that maybe we should have had the PIA right from the word go. It would have helped us in terms of the governance approach, because everything stems from the governance. If you have the right governance approach to the refineries, then there would have been a lot more clarity, a lot more oversight, and there would have been a tendency for reduced tendency for things to go wrong. But as I said, right now, we can only be grateful that we've got a Petroleum Industry Act. We can only be grateful that we have experts within the NNPCL leadership right now that are ready to assess decisions, options based on economic fundamentals and take the right decision. And let's just let it go, because if you want to look at it, we are looking at a completely different era. The PIA has brought a lot of sanity, and I think it's good for us to go with that sanity, especially right down there, there's a deregulation. So, the product prices allow us to understand if there is profitability or not in running the refinery. Remember, again, before the Petroleum Industry Act, where there were full deregulation of the downstream sector, the NNPCL on one hand was also involved in crude swap deals, at the same time running refineries. So sometimes you have conflicting objectives. You have to take crude and exchange for refined products. At the same time, you still have to allow your refinery to work. So those kind of conflicting objectives may become a conflict of interest. But what the current administration has done is to say, let's cancel all of those crude swap deals. Let's focus on getting our indigenous refineries working. And so we have a single objective. And if our refinery is not competitive under that single objective function, then let's look at other options that we can explore with it.
Very interesting. But Doc, there's something very critical that the current Ojulari-led NNPCL is doing. They are reviewing everything about the 4 refineries. And one of the arguments that come out of it from the public is that, particularly from opposition parties, opposition individuals against the government, is that the $18 billion that was spent, the government need to give account of it. But here we are, $18 billion was spent not by Ojulari, but a former management team under Military. The review is being carried out by Ojulari. What is your expectation of this review? Because we cannot separate or isolate the review from the $18 billion that was spent so far on those 4 refineries, because we must give account of it. So the question is that, don't we think that we need to call in the Military management to answer some questions in this regard?
Well, I try not to be very preemptive, because the Ojulari-led administration are just doing exactly, they're following the rule of law in the way they're going around the review. First, it starts with a technical review.
Exactly.
Let's even see, maybe we can document some lessons learned, not even for prosecution reasons, but so that we can have something to cross-pollinate across the various arms of NNPCL, and as a lessons learned, why we shouldn't do things in a certain way, and what kind of restructuring are required as we reposition NNPCL towards becoming a privately held company in terms of shares. That's one part. And then we now go to the economy, because let me give you a scenario. We could have spent 18 million that was appropriated and did it properly and transparently, but then the result was not, did not yield the outcome that was required. It's more like you get a loan properly, you invest the loan as you wanted, but then the loan did not, your business did not make money. Nobody can prosecute you for misappropriating money. You followed what you thought, but there was a mistake in your outlook. So let's not rush to think that, the 18 million was misappropriated. It may have been a fundamental economic flaw in the business plan itself. But I don't want to be preemptive, but I do expect that there will be a very deep discussion. But I think away from chasing the 18 billion that may have gone from a bad business decision, I'm more interested in the lessons learned that we will learn from the hindsight and cross-pollinate this for future decisions as we go on to expand our petroleum sector.
I really love your submission in that regard, because particularly aligning that for our future prospect in the oil and gas sector. And this brings me to the other issues that is being propped up in the sector today. That if we go ahead to do this planned sales or privatization, it's an opportunity for us to open up the midstream and the downstream sector of the petroleum energy sector of Nigeria. What do you think about that? That with this plan now, it's an opportunity to open up the midstream and the downstream for further investors driving, and further investors attraction in the Nigerian oil and gas sector. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is the beginning of unveiling those opportunities, because I'm not going to say that one cell is going to be a silver bullet that changes our fortune.
Exactly.
Because if you look at the midstream sector, as it operates in other countries, you have to have the right tariff system. You also have the right, you have to have the right protective terms. That means people can even come in and build a pipeline. In the US, for example, there are people that just come in and they build pipelines from one state to another, one region to the other. And frankly, they do not, they have no products. And as you send those products across, you pay a tariff for every volume that you send across. So it's a bigger thing when you talk about people coming to privately invest in the midstream sector. I mean, we have the Nigerian Gas Network Transportation Code that is supposed to help us, operationalize those aspects. And again, there's also potential to scale it to crude and even PMS, transportation of PMS across pipelines and crude and all of that, beyond gas. But what I'm trying to say is that just opening up for a refinery sale is maybe at the preliminary stage. I would not say it's a full indicator. There's still a lot we need to do. Protective terms for investors. We also need to, again, even ourselves, we need to begin to do some of those infrastructure funding. We can't leave it there, arid of land and ask investors only to come in and run their pipelines. If you want to just open your midstream, you have to open it to some level, and then investors provide the catalyst that will speed up that reaction. So I think it's just the beginning. I do not think it doesn't show that we are already conquering the midstream space at all.
Now let's also take a view of something very strategic, talking about the oil and gas sector. We have seen the opening up of the midstream and downstream that have given the likes of Dangote and Bua refinery coming up. Bua is 200,000 barrels per day, where Dangote is 650,000 barrels per day. We have seen the changing dynamics, that is, at least for Dangote, the changing dynamics that Dangote have brought into the fore of Nigerian oil and gas sector. And we are expecting the Bua refinery to also come up. It's situated in Akwa Ibom State here in Nigeria. But the question now is, how can we encourage more local investors? Because if the sales or privatization of this refinery will come, local investors must play their role, and foreign investors must play their role. But from your own perspective, where do you stand in this? Foreign or local?
All right, thank you very much. I think there's no gain to say that if we continue exporting crude, for example, we'll only harness 15% of the value chain, which is nominally being referred to in the technical word as the economic rents. But if we do not refine, it means we lose the opportunity to be able to harness the rest of the value chain, and also the opportunity to consume energy. And if we cannot consume energy that we produce, then we cannot industrialize. Okay? So that's to set the tone. That where I stand is where we can engender more productivity in our energy sector, and productivity from the aspect of industrialization and domestic refining.
Very interesting.
If you look at the way, so let me clarify something. Sometimes you have an MOU and then a memorandum of understanding that says, look, I'm interested in coming into your state, I'm interested in coming into your area to invest XYZ amount of money to build a refinery. But when you're taking a final investment decision beyond just expression of interest, there are certain fundamentals again that we need to define. what is your what is your supply situation like? Supply situation means, in simple sentence, do you have spare capacity from the upstream company that you are hoping to take crude from to refine? If you do not, do you have the relationship that can allow you to outsource this and still be able to refine, just like the Dangote is sometimes having to outsource the TI variants so that the refinery can come into full swing? That's the first thing that every refinery, for example, would have to answer. The second is, do you have the demand situation? The demand situation simply means, if you refine today, do you have enough off-takers that can buy at the right price that you're going to come into? So you have to check your entry price position. You have to look at the volume you're going to be pushing into the market. What is your entry price? And do you have enough people to obtain that, so that you don't end up in a tough situation? Because if you keep refining and nobody else is obtaining, then you end up in a tough situation where you have to shut down because you have more refined products than the capacity of your storage. It is when you've made this decision and you now ask yourself, all of these decisions I've made, whether it's the supply or the demand side of things, can I tie them to an agreement in 10 to 15 years, right? Because you do not want something that happens and then the next 2 months, those, as I said, those fundamentals do not hold through, and then your whole business plan is on the floor. Now, when you're able to tie them for a period that you feel allows you to comfortably operate and break even or scale your business, then that's when you can approach people for funding. And then when you get funded, they'll say, look, I have this supply situation, I have this demand situation, I've tied them in for a 15-year contract. This is the profitability you're looking at the worst case and best case. Are you ready to invest? That's when an investor puts their money down, and that is when you can now have a final investment decision. That is a long way away from just having an MOU or indication of interest. I wanted to clarify.
Exactly.
But back to your question, yes, it is important that players are coming into this downstream sector. But why I have to mention a lot of those, sort of the roadmap is so that the regulators, the people that are meant to provide the securities are clearly aware that these are the action items that are standing in between the MOU or expression of interest and the actual execution of the project after the final investment decision.
Very interesting. Doc, at what you have just said is bringing my attention and bringing me to raise issues around the latest issues that Dangote just raised among his retailers. Dangote, you could recall, he introduced a reduction in the price of his S-Depot price of his PMS. But he discovered something along the line. Most of his retailers are now reselling his product at higher price to other outlets. And because of that, Dangote have shut down, is no more doing discount on his price. Because what you have just said will definitely be one of the challenges that investors like Dangote will have. Currently, he is reducing his price, but all of a sudden, he discovered that that price is not reflecting on the general consumption of his product in outlets that doesn't belong to him. So, because of that, he has shut down, no more discount. But how can we, because my question is, how can we ensure that the grid within the supply chain of PMS in Nigeria, we can break that gene? What can we do to break that gene so that we won't be having this kind of thing that will be discouraging investors? Because as I already pointed out, if an investor is having such notion like Dangote has coming to the country to invest and I want to make his price to be more competitive, and is finding it difficult to do that because of unscrupulous individuals, it's a discouragement to business. But what can we do to reduce some of these challenges that we found ourselves?
All right, thank you very much. I think one thing that is very clear is the Dangote has tried to make sure that not only is he being very supportive from a pricing standpoint, but also make sure that whether through signing partnership deals with MRS, Adobe and the rest, that some of those benefits trickle down. Now, but the Dangote refinery itself can only be a player in terms of an operator in the field. They would not be able to achieve regulatory or enforcement oversight, which is the prerogative of the government. This is where institutions should stand up. I mean, there needs to be a clear line of sight to the responsibilities of the institutions. And, this is where the people are sitting. It's really tempting if the Dangote wanted to become a monopolist. Very tempting. But for him and the co-presidents have decided that they were going to take a different approach. They need to be encouraged. Institutions responsible to sit down, discuss, and ask, what are your experiences in the field? Where are the leakages? Where you try to put prices that are beneficial all the way to the final consumers, but there are some sort of issues where, as you said, unscrupulous individuals are making frustrating that effort. I think the Dangote refinery can give them real-time experiential information and enforce it. That will actually take a better enforcement. But for us to achieve that, it will need real partnership between the Dangote that is on the field and the regulators who, by the statute of the law, are responsible for enforcing such.
Very interesting. And your response has also made me to be tempted to ask you this question. Just some few weeks ago, a group of some energy experts are calling for a review of the PIA, particularly the section that are related to Nigerian Midstream, Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency. And they are saying that agencies have not been living to its expectation, particularly in regards of regulating the midstream sector, that it is not just giving licenses to people to import PMS that agency was created for, but enforcing that we have the right prices of petroleum products across Nigeria. So if you look at the experience of Dangote just recently, and for what you have said, and from the call of stakeholders who are saying that NPDRA need to be reviewed, particularly from the PIA aspect, what's your take, Doc?
Well, I mean, I'm not Congress one that, pushes for us to go into making regulations or altering regulations when we can actually attempt to, be able to push for better implementation. Because, again, it boils down to the individual. Let me ask you a question. If you have a change in the petroleum industry or for even that matter, even the regulation, and then you still have the individuals with the same mindset running the show, it's not going to be any different. And so I think we need to start looking at sincerity of purpose, in terms of when we're serving. What are we trying to achieve? A lot of that, I think, is not going to be solved by regulatory changes. A lot of that is going to be just solved by, this is the call of duty. This is exactly what the broader framework of goals that we want to achieve. And this is how we're going to steward our objectives to be able to achieve those goals ultimately. And then we take that just like a call of service. But other than that, we have enough regulations, my good brother. We have so much that we haven't even been able to implement. And before we even talk about how to start spinning around, because if you want to start spinning around, I will clearly tell you that no regulation, not even in the US, comes perfect. No act, not even the Petroleum Industry Act would not be perfect. There's no such thing. It is, what happens is experientially we updated, but having exhausted the possibilities of maybe using the right skill sets, the right people, the right attitude, and then it still poses a problem, then we can talk about making such major changes. But I think let's start with what constitutes the entire regulatory framework and those that are implementing this. How do we select them, and how how intentional are they towards implementing the provisions of the PIA?
Exactly. As I've said, how the people who are in charge implement these policies is what matters most. And you know, I know you have been following development in that sector for a very, very long time. When Ojulare was brought in by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a lot of people were also expecting that there could be a change of leadership in NUPRI, that Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency, as well as Nigerian Midstream Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency. But here we are, the people there who work with Melekari are still there, but we have a new person in NNPC. Doc, I can't thank you enough, but thank you for so much for your perspective, quite deep, quite insightful, and resourceful on the prospect of the sales of the NNPC National Refinery. We hope that what you have said so far could be something that could also add as advice to NNPC management as it carried out the review in those 4 refineries going forward. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you. God bless you.
All right. All right now. So enjoy the rest of your day in Lagos, sir.
You too.
All right.